There it is. We are live. And if you're watching this, it's probably not live. This is recorded. So, welcome to Bo Knows Health. That's me. I'm Dr. Bo Babenko, physiotherapist here in Erie, Colorado, Boulder County. And that's how we connected with Dr. David Saint Singh on the other side of the screen here. Dr. Saint Singh, tell us, and you're coming from Boulder City, Boulder County, all that good stuff right now, yes?
Yeah, you bet. We live in our practice both in the city of Boulder, so I guess Boulder City and County, right?
There you go. Yeah. I'm Erie City, Boulder County, whatever. Anyway, we're here in Colorado,
Yeah.
folks. The altitude's getting to us, and it is a lovely Sunday. World Cup action going on. Dr. Saint Singh's dog might give us a little background noise at some point. All good. And it's a new puppy you just got. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, we're trying to squeeze in a half an hour here, Bo, while the boykin sleeps. The little piranha comes out and starts eating my ankles.
All right, we'll try to get it in before he wakes up. And we connected at a kind of, I actually don't even remember what the exact theme of what was the name? What was the theme of that event?
It was, I think it was like a healthy aging event in Boulder over at the Jewish
Yeah,
Community Center.
yeah, yeah. And so my wife was interested in going for various reasons, and I got to tag along with our kiddo. And I saw your booth, Ikigai. Longevity medicine, Ikigai, all the words caught my attention. I love that concept. I don't get to see it out in the wild too often. And so I stopped over. We started having a chat and we connected. We had a coffee, caught up, got to know each other a little better. And here we are recording, trying to get our messages out a little further to the world. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, well, the word Ikigai and that concept before we get into the practice and what makes it necessary?
Yeah, you bet. You bet. Thanks for having me on, and it
Yeah,
was really fortuitous that we bumped into each other. I'm looking forward to see where this goes. Yeah, I'm happy to tell you a little bit about the word ikigai, and then we can talk about the practice in a minute. Ikigai is a Japanese Okinawan term, and I don't represent myself as someone who really fully understands all the history of it. I am sure there has been some westernization of that term, but at least our interpretation of it is that roughly it means one's purpose in life or their reason for existence, which we thought was pretty apt for a lifestyle / longevity / health span medical practice. It allows us to really sort of underscore that part of our mission is really to get to know each person and understand what they're all about, where they're headed, what they think their purpose is.
Yeah, I think that's a really good summation. I've also seen some people listening might have also seen that, like what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, what you can make money doing, and what the world needs. Something like that. Do you like that summation of it?
It's
Not really.
true, but I'll tell you, one of our patients, who's, I suppose, better traveled than I am, he clarified. He's like, "Look, this is not, this is not accurate. This is not what this means in Japanese. Like, this is very much an Americanized version of it." So we don't lean into that part of it too hard, especially with that information. So I think that, and like with a lot of cool things, people just sort of add on to it. So maybe that's it.
Yeah.
And we mostly just leave it as, hey, tell us a little bit about, what you think your purpose is and where you think you're headed over the rest of your life. If you could craft a roadmap, what might that look like? Who do you think you are?
Yeah, no, I love that, and I find in the work I do is between physical therapy, especially more specifically personal training, the one-on-one side, and now my wife just opened a business. I'll be running some dad circles. The number one topic we talk about anytime we have new dads in the group is how do you identify yourself? So identity kind of connects to that purpose. I kind of like that identity, and the same thing with the fitness. Someone's trying to lose weight or what have you. It's identifying with the fact that, yeah, I want to be there for my kids. So I am the person who gets up an extra hour early and goes to the gym or whatever that identity is. It just makes it a little easier rather than saying like, all right, can I make it? And when it's time to snooze or go to the gym in the morning, which am I going to choose? If you identify as that thing, I find we get better results that way. So that purpose, identity, there's a lot of overlap there. I love that word. I think we can certainly get more into the nitty gritty of how Americanized it is, but
Yeah.
I do appreciate that perspective on it. So you were 25 years, a little bit of your background, 25 years in the emergency department. You're still doing that emergency medical practice, correct?
Yeah, pretty part-timey, really just trying to lever up our Ikigai practice and then slowly back off on emergency medicine. And hopefully at some point in the near future, I'll be able to fully step away from that.
Very good. And but just bringing that up to say, and you talk about in your LinkedIn bio and profile and things like that, how that kind of led you to this practice. But seeing, and I've talked about this before on my show here, the whole upstream concept. You might know that book. Is it Dan Heath? Are you familiar with that book at all? Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, yeah. So seeing people drowning in the water, instead of trying to catch all of the people, pull them out of the water right away, you go upstream to say who is throwing these people in the water. How are they getting into the water to begin with? The preventative model, which again, a lot less sexy in a lot of ways, but it seems like we're heading that direction. And without maybe you know the numbers better than I do, and I've certainly again tried to have them in front of me at times. I don't have them in front of me now, but with the way GDP is going, how much healthcare we spend, how much we spend of our on healthcare as a country overall. It's the last I heard, it was around 2030 we might reach a critical mass. Maybe that was an over exaggeration. Have you heard any of these kind of numbers of if healthcare spending continues the way it is? Do you have a number where like we'll have a kind of like the mass extinction event of it all?
Yeah, I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to be able to tell you like when we reach the tipping point, but it's on the rise and it's been steadily on the rise relative to GDP. And we see this in a lot of other countries. Interestingly, I was talking with a guy yesterday in Boulder at a community swim meet, and he had been to India in the previous 3 or 4 years, and said that their spend just on antibiotics alone, antimicrobials, is some massive percentage, like a third of their GDP. I don't have proof of that, but he
Right.
seemed pretty confident that was a number, which just seems absurd, right? So I think if you, and sort of India side, kind of just focusing on the United States, if you want to limit that and you limit disease, right? You limit the manifestations of disease. And you're right, catching people downstream is late. That's the emergency medicine. That's my role in the ER. If you have a heart attack or a stroke, what is it that we can do if you come in quickly enough to mitigate that? And you're really kind of life, limb, organ saving measures, whereas the new practice couldn't be more different, right? So it is upstream. It's getting way upstream. But the reality is, as opposed to your analogy, right? You're swimming, right? You're rolling downstream in that analogy. But in the real world of health, you don't know. A lot of these processes are really insidious. You can't feel plaque developing in your arteries that are going to create risk for stroke, but when the stroke hits and you can't move a
Mm-hmm.
portion of your body or you lose your speech or whatever the manifestation is, it's just in the blink of an eye, then you are downstream, right? And somebody's trying to pull you out. So that's our goal, is to really start as far upstream as we can, or at least catch people before their cake is baked, and we can really impact them before somebody has got to pull them out of the water, before they're in the ER with their acute event.
Yeah, and I give credit to I guess he's now I don't know if we should use the term disgraced former creator of CrossFit, but I don't know if you're familiar with the whole story. But he was one I always heard say, we're trying to create swim coaches and not need lifeguards. And again, I've always liked that kind of analogy along these lines as well. But yeah, obviously we can go on and on about all the things wrong with healthcare, not just in this country, but all across the world. But that takes us again to your practice, and the question you posed here is, why is there a need for a medical practice like yours?
Sure. I mean, the things that I just talked about, right? And you probably experienced this in your life. I bet anybody who's listening to this is at least aware of someone that had a stroke or a heart attack. And the healthcare system isn't designed to aggressively, proactively identify the risk for those diseases and mitigate that risk. It's just not. It's not designed to detect cancers as early as possible. It's much more designed for sort of late triage and management rather than really, really early. And so there's this massive hole in the healthcare system. And I guess the question is, well, why would you want to identify these early? Is there something you can do? And, my own question that I just posed, the answer is absolutely. There are many levers that you can pull if someone is moving down that path towards a heart attack or a stroke or has metabolic disease, evolving obesity, which might be tied to insulin resistance. There's plenty that you can do to intervene. And if they were going to, let's just for argument's sake say, Bo, we discovered today that there's a reasonable likelihood that in 12 and a half years, you're going to have a stroke. And nobody has that predictive ability, right? So I'm not saying that. This is just for fun. Let's say we knew that. Then what we would say is, okay, how did we learn that? And what are the risk factors that put you in this position where we now have this reasonable likelihood? And what can we do in the next 12 and a half years to push that curve to the right? And the answer is there's plenty for any of the things that really impact our ability to age the way we'd like to age. The opportunity to intervene is massive. And the reason I have this practice is because this is not how the healthcare system is designed to detect early the risk and then mitigate that risk, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that takes us to your other question is, can we mitigate the issues we discover during the evaluation? So this concept of, knowing, hey, you might, these tests tell us you're looking at a stroke 12 years from now. So I would hope there's things we can do. But how do you go about addressing that question?
Sure. There's a lot that you can do. You just have to know what to look for. But I mean, we can talk about the blood vessel system a little bit, right? We have arteries on one side that carry oxygenated blood, veins on the other side that return everything to the heart. The arteries are the ones that tend to develop plaques that create risk for heart attack and stroke. We sort of lump all that into heart disease. That term tends to sort of cover all arterial blood vessel disease. So, what are the real risk factors for heart disease? And people might think, okay, well, diabetes, maybe some cholesterol issues, maybe smoking, maybe obesity, maybe family history. And those are certainly traditional risk factors that are all very real and very important for different reasons. But as we back up and think about, okay, well, what's really going on here? What we see is that the lining of the artery, and there's actually sort of a slurry-like lining inside before we even get to the first layer of cells. That's called the glycocalyx. And we think about, okay, well, what protects that? Foods and behaviors that help us produce nitrogen oxide, protect that, right? So if you're a beet eater, good for you. I don't totally love beets, so I try and eat other things, much to my wife's chagrin. But the glycocalyx can be protected, but it can also be damaged. So, and it's a very real thing, right? This is not voodoo. This is not pseudoscience. This is absolutely very real science. As we think about, okay, well, what are some of the things that do that? I did mention earlier high blood pressure, and chronic high blood pressure just beats up the glycocalyx. Smoking beats up the glycocalyx. But there are other things too that don't really get talked about a lot, right? We think of diabetes, and in particular type 2 diabetes, as very binary. You have it or you don't have it. You're fine or you're not fine. And that couldn't be further from the truth. It's a progressive continuum from having what we call insulin sensitive organs and cells that are inside those organs to developing some level of insulin resistance that can eventually become bad enough that it now has a label, which is type 2 diabetes. But along the way, recurrent daily spikes of insulin, recurrent daily spikes of your blood sugar will beat up the lining of the artery and create more risk for heart disease. And then the risk for stroke and heart attack rises because as we beat up that lining, whatever circulating molecules of LDL and its cousins you might have, then have a higher propensity to get caught in the artery wall. So those are just a few simple things that I've listed that we look at, right? We want to know okay, what are your insulin levels based on how you eat? And we can test that in the laboratory. We want to know what your blood sugar looks like on a daily basis. All of our patients wear continuous glucose monitors, and we learn from what they eat what their individual impact is. And then we're constantly giving them feedback just on those two issues that I discussed.
Yeah, yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I guess so. So just to, I guess, get a little behind the scenes, or even ahead of the scenes. Your practice then is daily contact, or is it monthly like how are there different plans? How does that work as far as how the patients are experiencing that versus? I'm going through the traditional medical system right now. Just to share, I've shared my story a little bit here. I think we might have talked about it a little when we met up. But I'm 42. My dad died of a heart attack at 41. Outside of all the stress that was associated with that. So I'm trying to go through the medical system at 39. I tried to do some preventative testing. Insurance didn't cover that. I've talked about all that stuff, but I might only get to communicate with my cardiologist, my general practitioner, PCP, maybe quarterly if I'm really being aggressive. Yeah. So the need for your practice, seems legitimate. But how does that setup go as far as you guys are set up?
Yeah, you're right. The dynamic that you experience is what most of us experience, and that's not the primary care doctor's design. That's the system in which they find themselves. So for most primary care doctors, they interact with you once a year. You have an annual visit, unless you have some medical issue that's a little more active and hot that they're trying to take care of. But generally once a year. That's what it is for me. In our practice, we think that to mitigate these issues takes a lot more touch. So our upfront evaluation process and then our ongoing engagement, it isn't set in stone. We text you once a week, or we email you once a week, or we give you a call. It's just personalized. It's a conversation that we're having, and I might have a patient that I'll text with truly, every day for a couple of weeks, or hop on the phone with them or whatever they need. And somebody else might not have any real acute ongoing issue, and there might be 2 weeks in between our interaction. So it's really whatever's needed for that patient at that moment in time, but for everybody, right? So we aren't, and this isn't just a heart disease medical practice, right? We're looking at what's your physical capacity, right? Which is obviously, something that's important to you and you're testing all the time. How strong are you? What's your mobility like? What's your strength like? What's your VO2 max like? And we stay on top of our patients with respect to how they exercise. We track this. We follow them on Training Peaks and track it. So there are various reasons for interaction. It may be that we've made a change in a medicine, or we've recommended a supplement and we want to see how that's going. Or perhaps we need to talk about what we're seeing in Training Peaks and what we were looking for, or perhaps it's different than what they're doing. And then we figure out, okay, what's the sticking point there? So the answer, I guess, to your question is it's individualized, but it's often, I would say, probably on average, 3 or 4 times a month. And again, sometimes it could be 7, 8, 9, 10 times a month that I'll interact with a patient based on what they need.
Yeah, I think those touch points are, I know that's also the way I work with folks in my practice, especially when I'm working more than just strength and rehab. If we're talking about other concepts and lifestyle change, I think those higher touch points to build those good habits are necessary for the accountability, as well as just that habit building seems to be pretty important. Getting ahead of those, putting out those fires, so to speak. So you do call the practice a longevity practice, correct? So tell us a little bit about the different types of longevity practice out there. I think it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, and hopefully we can bring a little more clarity and science to that definition.
Yeah, there should be some clarity and science around it. There's not, a lot of people will call themselves longevity. It's hot though, and a lot of people will say that, right? Folks that used to be functional medicine might layer that in now, and you don't need to be a physician to consider yourself a functional medicine provider. A lot of people do that. So it's very wild westy. You'll see people in the functional medicine world. You see chiropractors that'll use that term. You see plastic surgeons that'll use that term based on some things they prescribe. You might see dermatologists that'll use that term. And then there are docs, that I think probably are fairly similar to me that are using the term. But the way we practice might be really different. I'm aware of a practice where it's all just front end. You can come in and get some initial evaluation, but that doc will not provide you any care. It's a consultant type engagement. And you were asking earlier kind of what we do. We actually do both. We'll do sort of an executive physical type of evaluation that's really very front end driven for people that really just want to look under the hood and see what's going on. And then they can decide whether they want to stay with us or they want to take that information and then just try and manage it themselves. But we do have a practice, which is what you were describing relative to, hey, how often are you interacting with these folks? And in that case, I'm their doc and I interact with them very regularly. But the longevity, it's hard because it isn't well defined. So we just define it for ourselves. We try and market it that way. I mean, really, our goal is to help people, number one, identify kind of what their Ikigai is and help have some clarity with what they think what they think they want their path to be. And then as we go through the testing process, we figure out, well, is there a crossroads there? Because sometimes, maybe not sometimes, most of the time after we go through the initial round of testing, what we discover is the path that people think they're on is often very different from the path that they are really on. And it creates an opportunity to course correct. And that's really how we see longevity is, Bo, you say, hey, David, I want to put myself to live a life where I'm fulfilled as I age. And here's how I define that. Then I need to hear you and know you. And then as we go through the testing process and I watch you exercise, or we learn how you eat, or we learn what your habits are, and we take that wrapped into your physiology and we say, okay, well, here's what we learned and what you told me, I love it, but you're not on that path. You've got real risks to end up somewhere very different. But that's the beauty of it, is we have discovered that before somebody's pulling you out of the water, and we're further upstream, and now we're going to be able to mitigate that.
Yeah. Very good. I think we got a good handle of it. We're not signing off yet. I got some other thoughts, but I just want to be clear. Folks can reach out directly to you. I think we'll have your information in the show notes. But what are the best ways for folks to work with you? And can they work with you? They're out of state.
The best way to reach us, just go to the website, which is Ikigai Health Institute, and I presume you'll publish that. And the phone number's on there, the email's on there. We're pretty easy to reach. And in terms of how we who we interact with and where their location is, we have patients that are in state and out of state. The folks that visit us from out of state, they come in for like a week and they'll spend 4 or 5 days with us, go through the testing process. There's certainly downtime during each day where they can work or check out Boulder and see this beautiful area that we live in. And then we start coalescing that information. They head back home. We follow up soon thereafter, review all that data, and craft a game plan. And everybody will come back from time to time, but not super regularly. I can manage most of this remotely after that. And for the people that live locally, it's awesome. I get to see them in person on a pretty regular basis, which is a lot of fun for me.
Very good. Now, here we go. I haven't done this too often on the show, but I feel like it's a good opportunity to do a little rapid fire. You give me your thoughts on some different hot topics. Are you up for that?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
Let's do it. So first up, one of the biggest things we've seen in the last few years is GLP-1s. Quick thoughts.
GLP-1s are, they're good and bad, right? And as a drug, I mean, no drug has any intention, but it's really the use of it. And there's, great data out there that shows in certain populations it can be life-saving. And for people that have some level of insulin resistance, short-term usage of that can be really a gap bridge when you're strongly interfacing that with lifestyle changes to save their life, right? It can put them on a different path. Now they Unfortunately, there are, loads and loads and loads of GLP-1 clinics, whether that's, a phone call you need to make or hopping on a Zoom call or going somewhere where there's not a lot of oversight. And there's abuse of the medication, and it does help you lose weight. But what we've seen a lot of people is without supervision, they come off of it, the weight goes right back on. The weight loss often in an unsupervised setting is this mixture of fat and muscle. Very few people can afford to lose any muscle, right? It's just completely unhealthy to have muscle loss. But in the right setting, GLP-1s can be really useful, right? There's great data that surround GLP-1 use in people that have heart disease and severe insulin resistance or diabetes that prevents death. Ideally, in those patients that are on it, they're being educated, though, about, okay, here's what's going to happen to you when you take a GLP-1, and in particular, here's what that weight loss might look like, and here's how you protect yourself with appropriate protein intake and appropriate strength training so that you maintain your muscle mass. And if you're losing poundage, that poundage is fat, that poundage is visceral fat, and it puts you in a better position. So the medication itself, isn't a problem. It doesn't have a soul, right, or an intent. It's just how it's used in the healthcare system. It can be great, and it can be pretty risky.
So along the same lines, peptides. I know they overlap a lot, but some of the things I think you said, I don't need you to repeat, but I think they definitely overlap. As I was listening to you, and I knew this was the next one up. But thoughts on peptides? Just literally see every post in our local Facebook Boulder collective. If you're on there, I don't even know if you're on there, but every time somebody's like, "Hey, my shoulder's hurt, I'm thinking of doing surgery," I always see anonymous. Consider peptides. It's a guarantee at this point, but yeah, thoughts on peptides?
Yeah, I mean, we don't really get involved with peptides, and we know that this sort of niche in the greater healthcare wellness system is relatively new, and most peptides are not created in place where there's third-party validation of what's being put out there for people to take. So you don't definitely know that what they say is in it is in it. You don't definitely know that there might not be some other substance in it that's not claimed, because it's not regulated in that way. And then if you back up even further, the data behind these peptides doesn't really exist. There is some data, but there aren't great randomized controlled trials that look at it. And, for me, I just want to know, well, does it work? Does it really work? Is it efficacious? And then what's the safety profile look like? And has that been well established? And is that based on real science? And we know the truth behind real science is small letter T. It's not a capital T, right? Everything evolves and changes. And as people of science, we have to be open to learning as things evolve and change. But with peptides, the efforts at creating the data aren't there because they don't have to be there, right? If you could make, $100 million a year off the manufacturing peptides because you have, docs that'll prescribe it and patients that won't ask, where does this come from, or why am I even taking it? And there's no regulation. The temptation's sizable. And that's what the industry looks like. And it may be that some of these peptides have massive value, but there isn't a lot of data behind it, because there doesn't have to be until there's some level of regulation, which then would force, okay, let's take a look at these. And when you're talking about people's well-being, there are probably a lot of things that are overregulated in our world, but when it comes to somebody's health, I think it's reasonable to expect that some science be applied behind that.
That'd be nice. We're coming up on time. Your dog is not interrupted once, which is great. Last one of these, and then we'll sign off here. And I have some biases here, but sauna protocols for longevity. What are we thinking?
Yeah, there's more data behind heat treatment and shock proteins. We see the same thing actually with altitude training and the benefits from that. So I think it's, as we look at risk-benefit ratios, which is kind of what we're talking about with peptides, we don't really understand much of either with peptides. With this, there's a little more data that would suggest pretty low risk and a reasonable likelihood of benefit. Sort of the biggest downside would be just a heat exposure. If you don't do it correctly, that creates a risk for heat-related illness or electrolyte loss or dehydration. But those are all easy to mitigate. So I think there's pretty decent data behind it. And that's something that we certainly lean into a little bit.
I love it. I have my own in my house. I built one I just did it right before we went live here. So I'm a big fan
Nice.
of the sauna, and I put protocols in there because infrared sauna, I don't think nearly as effective based on the research. All the research generally traditionally done in the Scandinavian countries. They're getting their heat up to the 200 degrees Fahrenheit there. And I believe Brian Johnson, we didn't talk about him here, but I think he swallowed a little pill. I know you have some thoughts on him from our last talk, but he swallowed a pill and he showed that I believe he thought that the body had to, the internal body temperature has to get to above 102. So I'd be, we'll put a pin in that one. If we're reproducing some kind of fever in the body and the body's healing to that fever and responding, and that's the hormetic response. Anyway, I could go on that one, but and I'd be curious to get your thoughts. But we did say 30-minute cutoff. Here we are. So Dr. David Saint Singh, appreciate you being here. I'm looking forward to future conversations and collaborations. Any thoughts you want to leave the people with before we sign off?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Bo. Really appreciate it. And gosh, that went fast. I feel like we could talk for a long time.
Yeah.
I think just take the time to really begin to understand the things that impact your health span. Health span really is how well you live as you age. And there are a lot of resources out there. And I know it's hard to navigate because a lot of them are solid and a lot of them are not. But I think it's okay for people to really embrace that they're responsible for themselves and take charge of their lives and figure out, okay, like what are the things that I can do? Because a lot of this is lifestyle mediated. And so there are a lot of decisions that people can make about how they're going to live their lives that'll put them in a better place. Really isn't predicated upon our healthcare system. So I just encourage people to take the time to learn and then take some action.
Love it. I love it. Appreciate you sharing all that. And I hope, as I always say here, I know I got at least 1% better with this conversation. And I'm looking forward, like I said, to our collaborations. So signing off here, guys. Before we sign off, one last shout out to my sponsor, drinkelement.com/fitcare. We mentioned electrolytes at least once or twice. And big fan of that. If you go to the link here, you get a free sample pack. And that is that. Signing off. Hope to see you guys next time. Thanks again, Dr. David Saint Singh. Go check out his